In this video, you will learn how to add 2 new bones to your rig for moving the claw fingers. We will go over how to properly extrude them out in the hierarchy so that their bone roll is correct. We will then learn how to adjust the roll to compensate for any unwanted twisting, all the while making sure we do not break the geometry or the rig. Welcome back to the next video in the robot arm animation series. If we come out here, you can see what we have already. We've just got 2 controls here that we can use, and all we have to do is click and drag them to move where we want or rotate where we want, and everything should move just as we would expect a regular robot arm to move. And we only have 2 controls, so one to move, one to rotate the wrist, and then if we grab the one to move, we can also extend it out. We've got this little extender piston here. It doesn't go very far, but that's just a little extra reach in case it wants to grab something further away. But we are missing one thing, and that is the controls to open and close the claw fingers. And so that is what we're going to do in this video, and once we do, our rig will be complete. Now, if you've been watching this tutorial series from the beginning, you should be very familiar with how to navigate Blender, the shortcuts that I use, the buttons that I press. So I won't be going button by button in this video. If you still need to see what I'm pressing, I have my screencast keys over here. But I highly recommend, if you haven't seen the previous videos, that you go back and watch those first, because they include a lot of building blocks to get to where we are now. So let's get into it. In order to open and close the claw fingers, we need to add a few more bones that can be used as the controls. But let's clean up our view a little bit here. I'm going to go into object mode, and the very first thing I'm going to do is add in an empty circle. And that's this thing down here. We're just going to rename this to empty circle. You can do that here, or you can double click in here to rename. It's up to you. And then we're just going to deactivate all of this here, just like our other empties, because we're just going to use it for reference later for one of our controls. Okay, and then I'm going to select this one and then shift select these 4 pieces again. And since we're adding new bones and we're going to be moving them around, I don't want it to break my geometry. So let's Alt P, and we're going to clear the parent and keep the transformation. Then with everything still selected, I'm going to shift and click the armature and press / to go into local view. I'm actually going to quick pop back into pose mode because I want to select our control in the middle here and then just press H to hide that, because we only need a wrist bone for now. Okay, go back into object mode. I'm going to click on the armature to make sure that's the only thing that's selected, and then tab into edit mode. Okay, so that should be the only thing that's selected. If it's not selected, then you just have to click a couple times to go back and forth between these two. Make sure the inner one is selected, the one that says, if we come down to our bone properties, bone wrist. And then hover your mouse over the preview, press Shift H, which hides everything that's not selected. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to move this piece here, so this right in the middle of these 2 claw fingers, so that it's acting like a joint right in the middle there. I'm going to right click though to cancel that action because I want to be really accurate with this. If we tab back out into object mode, I can select one of the claws and then shift select the other one, and you can see the origin points I have actually put right here. And this is for easier rotation so that they can open and close easier. And so what we want to do with both of these selected is Shift S and then cursor to selected. And that cursor is going to be right in the middle of these 2 origin points. And that is what we want, so that looks good. So let's select our armature, go back into edit mode, and now with just this tail selected, so make sure not the whole thing is selected, but just this tail, Shift S, and this time we're going to choose selection to cursor. Good, because we want that to be right in the very center, acting as a joint that these can then open and close as if it were on a hinge. Okay, so this next part is very important. Just make sure that you are in front mode, front orthographic. If you have a different pose, just make sure whatever pose you have, that you are lined up on some sort of axis. So either the X or the Y axis. So if you were over here like this, maybe your claws this way, then I would just suggest rotating the entire robot arm so that it can be on one of these axes. This is not necessary, and if you're just following along with what I've been doing, then you already have it straight down the green y-axis here. So it's not that big of a deal, but I'll show you what you can do if for some reason your pose doesn't allow you to be directly on one of them. Okay, so back into front mode. I'm going to take this tail, make sure that's the only one that's selected, and let's first make sure that our snapping mode is on vertex. So if it's something else, by default it's usually increment, but it could be one of these other ones. Just make sure we're on vertex snapping. And now with this selected, we can press E to extrude, and if I hold down Control, then it will snap on one of these vertices here on the robot arm somewhere. So I'm just going to snap it on the inside one here, and then click to set that there, and then we're going to do the same thing, E to extrude, Control, and snap this one right there. Now before we do anything else, let's just make sure our rotation of these bones is good. So if you've done it in front orthographic mode, then it should be the proper rotation. So if I select this bone, I can come over to our bone properties tab, and this is in edit mode, remember. We have a roll of 82 degrees here. And then this one is a roll of 178 degrees here. If this roll is off somehow, it could skew these. Now, these are arbitrary numbers, so they may be different for you, but your roll is going to be defined by the front view. So once you extrude that out, then it's going to define the proper roll here for you. So we don't want to deviate from these rolls at all unless we need to adjust the rotation, which we're going to check right now. So let's go into pose mode, and then I'm going to select this bone first, and then come over here and choose rotate. Remember, if you don't see this, press T on the keyboard. And we're just going to look to see which axis this is best hinged on. And right now it looks like it's the blue Z axis. So let's come over here. And I'm just going to go into side view here. So we want to make sure that this blue axis is going straight down the middle of the claw fingers here. And let's make sure that we have the right one selected. I want this one selected. Go back into side mode. And right now it's a little bit off, but I want to show you what I'm talking about with the bone roll. So I'm going to go back into edit mode, and let's come over to the bone roll. I'm going to hover my mouse over here, press Control C to copy that. And I'm just going to go ahead and move this a little bit out of place. So let's skew it something like this. And let's go back out into pose mode. And now you can see what I mean is that this axis is really skewed. And if we try to rotate this around the Z axis, when we open and close that claw, the bone is going to be twisted out of place. And it won't match up with the other one. So when it opens and closes, it's just going to look crooked. So I'm going to undo that here, and let's go back, and we're going to paste that value in so that we have the proper roll here. But I'm going to select each of these here, shift select those, and then go into side view, and let's just grab those and pull them back just a little bit, something like this, so that it's going straight down the claw finger. And let's go back into pose mode and select one of them and see what we have. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's just select the other one, make sure it's the same thing. And I'm not sure about this one. We can go into the other side here. And that does actually look like it's going down, straight down the middle. We could pull this back a little bit. I'm going to, you know what? Let's do that. Let's just pull, nope, not that one. Let's make sure we have the right one selected. And go in here. I'm going to pull that back so it's lined up nicely with the other one. And all right, and that looks like it's going straight down the middle. So it looks good so far. The reason I'm spending so much time on this is because this setup is super important, because this can get really complicated and out of control if things are not set up just right. So let's test this out. I'm going to go into object mode. We're going to select this one, shift select, and go into pose mode. We're going to parent this one to that one. And then we're going to take this claw finger and we're going to parent it to this one. And then we're going to rotate them on the Z-axis to make sure that they match up when they close. So let's go into front mode. I'm just going to bring this in here to the middle there. And same thing with this one, bring that in. And we're going to make sure that they match up. Now, it is maybe a little bit off. You can kind of see this is not really that important, but I'm going to show you how you would fix this. So basically what we would do is make sure we go back into our resting pose, and then I think it's going to be this one. Let's go ahead and change the roll on that one. So I'm going to go into here and then just going to change the roll just a little bit, just slightly. So it's kind of squared up with the other one. And let's go back here. Let's go into front mode and let's pull this in, and we'll pull this one in also and see if we've actually made it better or worse. Oh, look at that. We've made it better. So I wanted to show you that even though it wasn't that big of a deal, it wasn't that twisted, that is how you would fix it if it was. So the way that I did this is without disconnecting the geometry because it was so subtle. But just so you know, when you don't disconnect the geometry and you adjust that roll, so let's just go back here. If I just crank this down, that roll, and then we go back into pose mode, you can see the geometry follows. So this method is okay if you can actually adjust that roll and be successful. So something like that. And then we go a little bit more. Yeah, something like that. And unfortunately, you can't see it in real time when you adjust the roll. So you have to tab back and forth between pose and edit mode. But if after you've parented your geometry to the claw fingers and you just can't get it to line up right, what I would do is I would go into our resting pose and then just disconnect the geometry. So I would just go back and then Alt-P to clear that parent and keep transformation. And then I would go into edit mode and then I would adjust the roll here first. And see if I can line it up with this one. So maybe go into side mode and then I would just see if I could line it up directly opposite that one, like that. And then after I finished moving the bone, then I would just come back out here and then make sure that was the only one selected and parent it to that bone again, and then try it again to see if that lines up. Because that might be better for things that are really out of place. Now here, you got to this point and you're like, oh, okay, well this is better, but it's still off. Then you could just come in here and tab into it again, just like we did, and adjust that as needed here. And I'm just really being picky with it right now because nobody's going to notice this. There you go. So something like that. Perfect. So we've got these. Let's go into our resting pose again. And before I forget, let's go back into object mode. I'm going to select these two. Since these are now parented to the bones, I'm going to select these two again by shift selecting and then shift selecting the armature. And of course, we're going to go back into pose mode and select the wrist bone only, and then Control P and bone. That way, when we rotate this, everything follows along nicely again. Great. So now we have our wrist that rotates everything, and then our bones that will open and close. But we don't want to open and close the bones individually because that takes too much time. We want one control that we can just slide up and down that will open these both at the same time. So when you're ready, head on over to the next video.